The Bank of Canada is causing the collapse in productivity an emergency. And not only that, we are seeing food bank usage absolutely skyrocket across the country as this country is in full economic collapse, unfortunately. And I don't say those words lightly. Those are not fun words to say by any stretch of the imagination. So Bank of Canada sounds alarm on low productivity, cites inflation risk. So the Bank of Canada on Tuesday said businesses urgently needed to boost investment to increase productivity, saying this would help insulate the economy against the threat of inflation. Not just inflation, because when you have productivity that is going down or it's flat, that basically means the standard of living is, guess what, going down. It basically means the economy isn't growing. But Canada's economy is very, very broken thanks to the red tape, regulation that stifle new growth and new business investment, thanks to the oligarchies that are in place that just push pro-protectionist Canadian policies that on the face of it sound really great for Canadians. But when you look into it, it's to stop other players coming into their market and competing, which would drive down the cost, which would be better for Canadians, and also the economic growth that comes with that. I'm saying that it's an emergency. It's time to break the glass. Senior Deputy Governor Caroline Rogers told a business audience in Nova Scotia. So yeah, I would say that too. We've been talking about this at the channel many times. Productivity that is going down this much is not a good thing. It's never a good thing when you're seeing productivity fall like this. Businesses aren't investing in workers. There's a whole lack of incentive there as well, because the incentives of a capitalist economy, owning a home, having a family, seem like far away and abstract realities to young people. And you think about young people's motivations, they just don't have any, because they have been taken away by the housing bubble and the credit bubble and the timing of literally when they were born. I mean, a lot of people who've built up equity in homes due to the housing bubble, they haven't done it because they were smart. They've done it just based on the time that they were born and when they happened to enter the housing market. But so many people will lose money and are losing money as we see record declines in housing prices because we're in a housing bubble, as I've said many times. So credit card debt climbed 3 times the rate of mortgages. Again, what could be more of a leading indicator than credit card debt and home equity line of credits rising right now with interest rates as high as they are? If people are going on to credit cards, they are pretty damn desperate. And you think about Canadian banks, they will pretty much give a credit card to a cat or a dog or anybody with a pulse. I mean, when you first get to Canada and you look around, you see advertisements and billboards everywhere of newcomer programs that introduce new people to the idea of credit and the idea of a credit card. They don't say it's 30% interest though, do they? So it's very hilarious because unfortunately, a lot of these people are coming from countries where credit just is not common. And in fact, outside of Canada, it is much harder to get loans and to get credit. In Canada, the banks literally will give it away. I mean, I've never seen lending like there is in Canada, and obviously it comes with dire consequences when you're in a credit bubble, and when you're in a credit bubble, this is exactly what you would expect. So Canadian household debt is rising, but more in line with inflation and population growth these days. The balance of outstanding household credit saw monthly seasonal adjusted growth of 8.8 billion to 2.93 trillion in January. Just to put that into context, guys, that's more than the economy, that's more than the entire money supply, even though the money supply is to a large part the amount of credit that has been lent and can be destroyed as well. The money supply can go backwards. So it's very, very interesting and dangerous. When you put it in the context of the economy, the amount of money in circulation, you realize, hold on, this is like a pyramid scheme. So anyway, 2.93 trillion in January. Unadjusted annual growth was 3.4% for the month, a slight acceleration. However, it was still the slowest 12-month change for January, going back to at least 1990. And now what I really want to illustrate on this chart is what has happened during the time times where you've seen credit slow. So for example, in 2007, we saw credit contract. And would you look at that, it peaked out before the recession in 2007, before the crisis. And we've seen a similar thing that has happened right now with it peaking in around January at 8.3%. And just remember, guys, for this to be sustainable, it has to be above wage growth. And it just isn't. It's nowhere near. It left that behind many, many years ago. So it's very interesting. So you've got what's happening there. And then if you look in the 1990s, where we had a massive recession, you know, the yield curve is as inverted as it was in the 1990s right now here in Canada. And also you had the most bank failures in the 1980s and the 1990s that Canada has ever seen in its history. So obviously declining credit there, indicative of not good things. It's not good things because it's set up like a pyramid scheme. The banks have to keep lending. They have to keep getting new people if they can. Maybe that's why they drive and lobby for immigration so hard, is because they just have to keep expanding credit, because if it stops, then that creates big, big problems for them, as I've actually discussed in a prior video that I'll link at the end of this video if you're interested. So anyway, interesting what's going on. So Canadian mortgage debt rose at the slowest rate since 2001. Mortgage debt represents the vast majority of the total outstanding balance. Households saw seasonally adjusted mortgage growth of 1.1 billion, 0.1% to 2.17 trillion in January. Unadjusted annual growth was just 3.4%, marking the lowest rate since 2001. And then this is really interesting, guys, because look, even back in 2016, mortgage growth was 6.9%. Were wages anywhere near that? I mean, at the lowest, it's been at 3.9% and 4%. And at the highest, you've been over 10%, and wages have not been. So now you can see what's happening. You've got non-mortgage loans, which is the blue line. You've got mortgage loans, which is the red line. And you can see that the non-mortgage loans are about to overtake the growth of the mortgage loans. And if you again look back at instances where this has happened, it has not been during good times. It's been during times of economic crisis and recession. So yet this is more indicative that problems are going on, because obviously confidence, people taking on mortgage debt isn't happening. But yes, they are taking on other types of debt, credit cards, home equity lines of credit, which isn't good, which we'll go into now. So one surprising shift is borrowing of non-mortgage credit, which is suddenly in vogue. Seasonally adjusted mortgage growth was 3.5 billion, pushing the balance to 750 billion in January. The unadjusted annual rate growth was just 3.4% for the month. According to the agency, home equity and credit card debt were significant contributors. They found home equity credit plus 0.9 billion or 900 million plus 0.5% rose nearly as much as mortgages over the same period. Credit card debt plus 1.1 billion plus 1.1% was also rising at the same dollar volume as mortgage credit, advancing at 3x the rate to accomplish that move. Just think and take in for a second what they have said there. I mean, it is just utterly ridiculous when you look at the facade of the housing bubble and the credit bubble right now, and you put it in the context of what is going on in the credit markets. It just doesn't make any sense. There are so many signs of distress when you look around that it is unbelievable. It is undeniable. Nobody can deny what is going on in Canada. So anyway, let's get into what is going on with grocery prices, and then we're going to get into the food bank numbers. You are going to want to stick around for that because it is just crazy and shows the economic failure. So basically, they compare a basket of goods between 2021 and between 2024, and this is what they found out. So the items in the basket of produce, packaged foods, and other household staples were priced at a total of $82 in March 2021, according to StatsCan. Today, Walmart's price for that basket is $113.32, a 38.2% increase in just 3 years. Compare that with the increases of only 8.2% in average weekly pre-tax earnings in the past 3 years. I mean, God, it's crazy. And then you think about all the other increases, like increases in CPP, the carbon tax, all that money that has been took away from people. And then you think 8.2% is all we've seen in 3 years. And inflation has been raging way more than that. I mean, 38.2%. And nothing says economic failure more than food prices and the ability for a country's population to feed themselves, in my opinion. If you go back to the Soviet Republic, the USSR, exactly the same thing happened. The ability for them to feed their population diminished. A lot of people were starving, and people are starving themselves right now in Canada. And if it wasn't for food banks, then those people would be literally going starving. So it's literally due to charities, essentially, that these people are able to sustain themselves. And a lot of people are cutting back on what they eat. I'm even seeing that in my home country, the UK, where people are cutting back on what they're eating. So very interesting. And now we're going to go into the GDP report, because this is so laughable, guys. Honest to God, when I read this, I was just not surprised at all, and neither will you be. So we just had a blockbuster GDP report that came out, but when you actually break it down industry by industry, my God, just look at it, guys. The public sector was behind most of that growth in the GDP number. You look at other sectors, not really that well. They attributed the real estate and rental and leasing due to the fact the housing market went up a little bit in January. Activity surged a little bit, but has since flopped since then, as we know and has been covered on this channel. You've got mining and oil and gas extraction going backward when we've got rising oil prices and supposedly a premiere that is fantastic in Alberta. I mean, it's just laughable, you know. You change these people, nothing happens in reality in the background, just a load of speeches. And anyway, you can see construction on the decline, utilities up slightly, manufacturing up slightly, just offsetting the declines from previous months. But I mean, again, this would have been flat or negative without the public sector growth. We are just being misled here. It is a joke. So anyway, let's get into the food banks across Canada now. This is just alarming, and again shows the economic reality of what we're facing. So we are in crisis. 1 in 10 Torontonians now rely on a food bank, new report says. Food bank usage in Toronto doubles in just 1 year. That was released in January. Calgarians can't make ends meet as national food bank use hits highest recorded levels. We're in a state of crisis. Montreal food bank seeing highest demand ever. BC food banks struggle to keep up as demand across Canada soars. Nova Scotia food banks scramble to meet surge in demand. So again, pretty much every province going through exactly the same thing here. So again, it's not good. Anyway, if you want to see that video I was talking about earlier, I'd highly recommend you check that out. If you're looking for a VPN to get around the censorship laws in Canada, go to expressvpn.com/marketmania. I will see you in the next one. Take care.